What's going on, everybody? My name is Mike Montgomery, and today we're turning this old shed into this brand new workshop on modern builds. So welcome to the shed. This old barn is on my new Joshua Tree property, and as you can tell, it's got decent bones, but it needs a lot of work. And the first thing we're gonna do is pour the concrete for the floor. Let's get it prepped. First, Brett and I laid down a grid of 1/2-inch rebar everywhere we're pouring new concrete. This is hopefully going to prevent it from cracking over time. I'll be using these concrete riser blocks called dobbies, which have this wire attachment to hold everything in place. They basically act like little feet and help you level everything out. At this point in the day, the concrete truck was on its way, so I switched out of my Ariat boots and jeans, and Brett and I installed this expansion joint foam around the perimeter of the slab. This is gonna allow the new slab to expand with heat. So it's concrete day. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before, but we got a truck to deliver 3 yards. Let's hope for the best, fingers crossed. I think I paid about $350 bucks to get this concrete delivered, and it saved so much work.
Here we go.
The concrete chute was only able to get about 2/3 of the way into the shed because of the door opening. So the master of concrete, Dale, asked us if we wanted to do a hot shot.
It's a hot shot.
Basically, a hot shot is just throwing the concrete out of the chute with a lot of force to get it into places the chute can't reach. It worked out great, and from there, Dale ran the chute while I spread the material around. It was really great having someone who knew what they were doing there, so shout out Dale, thanks. After the concrete truck left, we used a straight 2x6 to screed the material as flat as possible using the existing edge of the concrete as our reference. I rented this tool called a bowl float from Home Depot, and it just gives a nice finish to your concrete after it's flat. Unfortunately, Brett and I didn't get this slab perfect because we're new. I want to ease the transition between the old concrete and the new concrete and just level everything out. That way I'm building on a super flat surface. Not to mention, here in the front of the shop, the concrete got a little bit rough because it started drying on us before we screeded all the way towards the door opening, and we got this finish that's not perfect. My plan though is to do a flood coat over the whole slab. To do this, I ran a bead of spray foam insulation around the perimeter of the 2x4 plate. That way, it was waterproof. Then, I grabbed a bunch of bags of self-leveling underlayment and mixed that up with a drill attachment. I was looking for a pretty watery mix here. You want something even more thin than pancake batter. Once I got into a groove, I mixed up 3 or 4 buckets at a time, and that seemed like a good amount to work with, and I did my best to let gravity do its thing. Since this concrete mix is so thin, it'll just take the path of least resistance and level itself. If you need to work it in any direction, a squeegee is convenient though to help feather it out. This product is typically what people use to level out a bathroom floor for a renovation or something like that. I don't know if people typically use this many bags at a time for a project this large. What I learned is that the concrete mix isn't as strong as typical mix, but that's no surprise. All in all, I was able to take this concrete from a C- to a B+. Worth it. I gave that skim coat a couple of days to dry, then I came back with a chisel to remove that spray foam insulation. So as you can tell, this wall and this door is about to fall off the shed, so we need to fix it real fast. We were able to force and clamp everything into place, then I drove some screws into some header boards that were secure. After that, we used mending plates everywhere around the foundation that needed it as well. Finally, we could take out all of those old cabinets, which I'm definitely not reusing.
Yeah, well, that's it.
They came out pretty easy. There were just some screws going into the studs behind them. This was a dusty job and revealed a lot of exterior plywood problems, but we'll fix that. These 2x6 rafters are not structural. In fact, they're only held in with drywall screws to create a storage loft. They really made the space feel boxed in. I think they were only about 7 feet high. So first, we got all of the plywood decking out of the way, then I could remove the 2x6s themselves. Getting that OSB out of the way really opened up the space, and I was getting excited for how much better it felt. Most of these 2x6s came out easily, but for a few, we broke out a sledgehammer, which is always fun.
Yeah! Oh my gosh! He's getting so much bigger. That's what she said. Really walked into that one.
So you can already see how much more open this space is. This center beam is a 4x6 and it's nailed in unlike those 2x6s. But to get a little bit more headroom and just breathing room, we're gonna raise it up and eventually, I think I'm gonna put a chain hoist on there, so I'm happy to have it. I did my best not to damage the brackets as we were removing this 4x6, and we were able to reuse it, which is really nice. We just lifted it up a couple of feet, then put that beam back into place. Pretty easy.
Yeah! My dude. Teamwork!
I think we actually squared it up a little bit more too.
Cool.
Once that was in place, Brett and I called it a day, and I could not believe how much better this shed feels. It's no longer claustrophobic, and the concrete slab looks great. Before I did anything else, I wanted to address the problems with the exterior plywood. There were sections where it was trying to separate from the 2x4 studs, so I ran a bead of construction adhesive on every 2x4, and I made sure to put extra anywhere it was trying to peel away. For the most part, this plywood sucked right back up against the studs, but there were a few places where it did not want to bend back. I had the idea of using water to help bend it back into place. I thought it would soften it up, but to my surprise, as the plywood soaked, the pressure relieved itself and it almost went right back into place on its own. Then I was able to throw some screws into it, and it's been good ever since. Super pro. I really like the rustic look on the exterior of this shed, and I want to keep it for as long as possible. So I threw these 2x4 blocks everywhere that there was a seam in the exterior plywood, and I hope that helps. Okay, can we just take a second and appreciate how much bigger this shed shop feels? It's incredible. I won't lie, before we opened everything up, I had reservations. I didn't know if this space would feel comfortable enough to build in on a daily basis. But now that I'm filling it out for the first time, I am loving it, but we're not stopping here. The high side of this single slope roof is 10 feet tall and it faces east. So to get all of that natural fill light in here, I'm gonna be taking out the top 2 feet of this wall and I'm gonna replace it with polycarbonate panels. But before we can do that, I'd like to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Ariat Workwear. For the past couple of months, you all have been seeing me wear my Ariat gear almost every day, except concrete day. And that's because Ariat Workwear looks great, feels great, and is made out of high quality materials. The 8-inch Cascade boots that I'm wearing are so solid. They look good and they're heavy duty. I've never owned a pair of 8-inch tall boots. Instead, I've only had a 6-inch tall ankle. These provide a ton of support. I love them. The M8 line of jeans I've been wearing have a great slim cut and the material has a lot of built-in stretch. And finally, the Dura Canvas jacket is a classic and has held up great during all of these tough and dirty jobs. So if you're interested in learning more, make sure and follow the link down in the description to my landing page on Ariat's website where I've got all of my favorites that you can check out. And be sure to sign up to Ariat's email list to get 10% off your first order. Oh, and lastly, I'm doing an Ariat gift card giveaway on my Instagram this week, so make sure and check that out too, @ModernBuilds. So one more huge thanks to Ariat for sponsoring today's episode. Now back to the build. I made sure to set all of that existing trim to the side, that way I can reinstall it when the polycarbonate panels are up. This was a fun process because as the light started to fill the space, I started to get a feel for what it was gonna look like. Then I could unbox the polycarbonate that I bought off of eBay for a really great deal. I'll make sure and leave a link down below. And those went right into place. I had a 24-inch wide opening, and these 2-foot by 4-foot panels went in place, some of them without even needing cut. That's awesome. I used specialty roofing screws with a soft washer on them, that way they could get a strong hold without denting the polycarbonate too much. On any of the pieces that I did need cut, I applied masking tape to prevent chip out, and a 60-tooth circular saw blade was great. Pro tip, I left the plastic sheeting on the inside of the panels. It's gonna work to mask the windows when I spray the inside of the shed with paint.
Before I can reattach all the old trim onto this shed, there's one more thing that I need to address here on the roof, and I think it might be easier if I just show you. So as you can tell, whoever built this shed took the time to install a drip edge here on the side, but there's no eave. The actual roof line does not extend past the side of the shed. Now I assume they planned on extending the roof line to those footings over there. And I don't have any plans of extending that roof line anytime soon, so here's how I'm gonna fix it.
For a quick and dirty repair, I attached a 2x4 and 2x6 together to create a simple ledge that extends past the wall of the shed. This isn't perfect and it's not gonna be anything crazy, but it'll be better than what's already there. We threw in a ton of screws as we worked our way down. There was quite a bit of twist in the board, and you saw how bad of shape the roof is in, so I plan on doing a corrugated panel roof later on in this series. And until then, I applied this waterproof seam tape along that new joint, and I think we are good to go. Back on the inside of the shed, I used more spray foam insulation everywhere that there was a gap in the existing plywood panels and 2x4 studs. Just like every other step in this process, I went a little overkill and I decided to put insulation on every seam. Then, we could do foam batting insulation on the walls and ceilings. I want to give my buddy Brett McAfee a huge thanks for the help on this project. I'll be sure to leave his channel linked down below. I used a cordless stapler to attach the paper flaps to the inside of the studs. This will keep the insulation from sagging over time. I used R13 insulation, which isn't crazy, but it's gonna help a ton. It was the only insulation that our Home Depot had in stock for 2x4 walls. Cutting this stuff is easy, just use a sharp utility knife, and I used a plywood board underneath, that way I wasn't scoring into the concrete, dulling my blade. There were quite a few small pieces, but since they were all the same size opening, I was able to do batch cuts, and that made everything go by way quicker. Getting the insulation was a little bit tougher on the doors because of the cross braces, but it still worked out great. I wanted to make sure and insulate these well. It seemed like a huge waste if we did all of this work, but then let the doors be a huge draft point. It was pretty funny. We could tell that the insulation was working pretty quickly because we switched out of our jackets into just t-shirts after this insulation was done. We were doing this work in the middle of winter, and even though we're in Southern California, it still gets pretty chilly, but this shop started heating up quick. As you can tell, the spacing on the rafters for the ceiling are 18 inches apart, and since we had 12-inch wide insulation panels, Brett fastened these custom pieces by ripping one sheet down the middle and stitching them together. Great news, everybody! Insulation is done. It's on the walls. We've got it on the ceilings, and it's warm in here. As you can tell, I'm wearing a t-shirt. Brett was wearing a t-shirt, but we're packing up. We're done for the day. It was long. We worked hard, but it went great. And we'll be back tomorrow to put plywood on the walls and up top. See ya. The big upside to hanging plywood on your walls rather than drywall is that you can screw anything you want, anywhere you want. And I'm gonna be doing a lot of tool and shop organization things that will be wall mounted, so this is gonna be super convenient. I used 1/8-inch spacers on all of the meeting edges of the plywood. This gave a really cool reveal. It also gave us some wiggle room in all of the places where the shed wasn't perfectly square. You also see me using this 3/4-inch riser everywhere the plywood meets the floor, and it's doing the same thing.
The majority of these panels went up quick, especially the pieces that were full sheets. But I did have to make a lot of custom cuts, and me and Brett kind of split our time installing and cutting. It worked out great. At this point in the project, I'm just gonna turn up the music and let the time lapse run. We cut a ton of custom pieces and installed them just like this. I spent a full day custom cutting all of these pieces, and it was a ton of fun. I did my best to keep the 1/8 inch reveal everywhere that I could. This was totally inspired by a video I saw from Scott Brown Carpentry that I'll link down below. This is construction quality, and his was finished carpentry grade, but same idea applies. Thanks.
The walls took way longer than I expected, but I think that they look great. I love the 1/8 inch reveal between each of the panels. I think it makes everything look way more intentional. And next, Brett and I are gonna hang panels from the ceiling. Even though they are going up upside down, it should move pretty quickly. Realistically, it's only about the same amount of surface area as one of the walls. Let's do it.
Instead of using the same 1/2 inch plywood that we used to line the walls, I picked up 3/8 inch plywood, and this is what we put onto the ceiling. It was a little bit less weight, and it's not gonna be holding anything up like the wall panels will. Using scaffolding on this project helped a ton. It was nice not using ladders, being able to run back and forth across the platform to fasten everything down. We were also able to hang about 3 or 4 panels before we had to move the scaffolding much, and that made everything move more quickly too. And finally, once the last ceiling panels were in place, I could fit these last pieces on one of the walls. At this point in the project, I probably could have called it. Everything was looking really nice, especially considering that the shed wasn't square anywhere to begin with. But since we had come this far, I decided to keep going the extra mile, and I applied 1x2 trim on all of my corners and places that had bigger gaps than I liked. If my gaps and seams were consistent or small enough, I would have gone with a minimalist no trim look, but I feel like it was necessary, and the 1x2 is still pretty discreet. I bought 12-foot 1x4s to trim out between the polycarbonate and the plywood walls. I just tied down one screw to anchor the corner in place, then I found level and ran those screws all the way down the board. There was a big upside to installing all of this trim, especially for the plywood panels that were bowed or cupped. I was able to drive a screw straight through the trim and into the ceiling panel and pull it down flat to remove any of that warping. And with that, part 1 of our Shed to Workshop series is complete. As a reminder, here's what our closed-in shed looked and felt like before. And here is after.
Start it up.
Come on in.
I say this a lot, and it's not to pat myself on the back, but I am so impressed with how this workshop feels now. If you remember those ugly befores, and you compare it to what this shed looks like now, it is night and day. There's so much more natural light filling the space, and raising the roof turn this from a claustrophobic place into a space that I cannot wait to start building out of.
So one more time, thanks a million for watching. I really appreciate all the support and I cannot wait to get more videos out on the new property. Before I can do any of the home improvement or renovation projects on the new place, I need to get this workshop completed, and this is a great first step. The space feels way bigger than I thought it would, and I love this top row of windows. Very Frank Howarth inspired. If you're not already, make sure and click the subscribe button down below and the notification bell. That way you stay updated when I post new videos. Also, if you want to keep up with me between YouTube videos, you can follow me on Instagram. I am at Modern Builds. Episode 2 of the Shed to Workshop Conversion series is coming soon, so everybody have a great week, and until then, we'll see you next time on Modern Builds. Bye, everybody.